very much. It's great to be in Beaverdale. It's great to be here with my husband, John.
Everybody.
And our daughter, Abigail, who maybe you know has been filling in for me a few times and somehow got herself on the front page of the LA Times. That was pretty good. And then also I want to thank my good friend Peggy Flanagan, the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, and actually the highest ranking executive office holder of any Native American in the country, with more to come. So we're really excited. So, we have been everywhere in Iowa. I'm trying to make up for being gone for 10 days in 2 days. So we have been everywhere. We've been in Bettendorf, in Sioux City, we've been in Cedar Falls, and now I am here. I am so excited about what we're seeing with the crowds everywhere we go. And I think you can imagine all week I was sitting there, I had a lot of time to think about a few things. I had time to think about why I was running for this office. I had time to think about all of you and how I knew that the people of Iowa would understand that it is important to have a candidate for president that is in the arena, that is pursuing the truth, and is doing her job, and that you would see that as a positive, as a plus. And then I had time to think about what we were doing. And I said on the debate stage in Des Moines that if our Republican colleagues are going to deny us even the modicum of witnesses and the truth, that they may as well hand the President of the United States a crown and a scepter. Because our country has always been one founded on the laws, that the president is not king in the United States of America, the law is king. And for those of my colleagues who voted against simply seeking the truth with witnesses, regardless of how they would have voted on impeachment, I'm telling you right now, the truth is not going to wait to come out for 5 years or 5 months. It's probably going to come out in 5 weeks or 5 days, because they have refused to allow the president's national security advisor to testify under oath, even though he wants to. They have refused to listen to his former chief of staff, General Kelly, who said that you've only done half your job. These are Trump people. And when they keep referring to them as your witnesses, I keep thinking, no, they're your men. They are people that worked for you. So that is what's going on in Washington right now. And I actually see it as part of what's going on with this campaign, because I may be the juror in that chamber, but you are the juror in this election. You are the juror in the primary, and you are the juror in the general election. That's your job. So while I'm doing my job, you have your job to do. And one thing they have in common is that what we talk about, that impeachment hearing, is someone who is literally every step of the way puts his private interests, puts his partisan interests in front of the interests of our country. And that is where I will start, because yes, this election is an economic check. We see it when you have friends that can't afford their insulin or pharmaceuticals, people who still can't fill their refrigerator or their prescription, who have to try to make a decision on that, people who can't pay their rent or mortgage. All of that is happening right now because this is not shared prosperity in this country. And we have been debating different ideas on the debate stage. But we also know that there's something else going on in this election. Because not everyone that watches, people who stayed home in 2016, people in those 31 Iowa counties that voted for Barack Obama, some by big margins, and then voted for Donald Trump, 31 counties in your own state, people who voted for independents, people who'd stayed home, they are watching those debates. And they don't agree with everything that people say on the debate stage. I don't agree with everything that people say on the debate stage. But there is one thing that they all agree on, that we all agree on, or you wouldn't be here in this gym on a Saturday night. That is that the heart of America is so much bigger than the heart of the guy in the White House. It is so much bigger. It is so much bigger. Because this election is not just an economic check. It is also a decency check. It is a patriotism check. It is a values check. It is about a president who stands next to a ruthless dictator, Vladimir Putin, on the world stage, and when a reporter asks, what about Russia interfering in our election? What about that? He looks at the ruthless dictator and he makes a joke. You think about it, hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost their lives on the battlefield fighting for that simple idea of democracy in our country and in countries around the world. That's what World War II is about. That's what those 5 brothers in Waterloo, they lost their lives for that. You think about the 4 little girls at the height of the civil rights movement who lost their lives in the church, that church in Alabama. They were simply trying to be part of that democracy. They were trying to hold on to it. 4 little innocents. And other people were trying to push it away from them. The best and the biggest moments in this country's history, as well as the worst moments, have been about democracy. They've been about our Constitution. They've been about people standing up for decency. Like one guy from Primgar, Iowa, decades and decades ago. He came from a humble background, immigrant family. He ends up getting to be the highest lawyer for the United States Army, the counsel for the Army. His name was Joseph Welch. And during those McCarthy hearings, when Joseph McCarthy, the senator, was going after people for their political beliefs, for their supposed political beliefs, belittling them, when he was going after people and they were losing their jobs and getting blacklisted, and people were afraid to stand up to him. And then he took it out on this national stage, put the limelight on it in congressional hearings, and no one would stand up, but one man stood up from Primgar, Iowa, who went to Grinnell, who went to the Army. That guy, Joseph Welch, he was the one that stood up and looked at the senator in the eye and said, "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you no sense of decency?" That is what this is about. So I want us to remember this. I am so proud of the support that we have built. We have fired up Democrats supporting me, like the great Marty Anderson here. We have people like Ruth Ann Gaines. And then we even have a mayor that just changed parties. Just changed parties in Indianola, changed parties from Republican just to caucus for me. That's what we've got. We have got Andy McKean, the legislator, who in this dramatic moment stood on the floor of the State House and changed parties because he said he couldn't stomach it anymore last spring. And he has joined our group, and we have the most legislators of anyone in this race in the state of Iowa that have joined our campaign and endorsed me. That is because I believe that people need a home, that we need to bring people in instead of shutting them out. And it's not just rhetoric, it's the stories, and you know them. For me, it's the rancher in Minnesota who took me on a tour of his cattle ranch and this ATV, and we were dodging these big cows, and I thought, this is not how I want to die. And then he took me into the ranch house, and everyone left, and he said, "You know, we voted for Trump." And I said, "What do you mean, the ranchers, your family?" He said, "No, I don't like to talk myself, so we is me." And he said, "And we did it because we were mad about health care." And he said, "And then we saw him in front of that wall." And I said, "No, the wall didn't get built." He said, "No, the CIA wall." He remembers the day after the inauguration when Donald Trump gave an incredibly partisan, inappropriate speech in front of a sacred wall which is covered with stars of anonymous CIA agents who lost their lives for our country in the line of duty. And he gave a speech there about the size of his crowd. And this guy watched. And then he said, a while later, the last straw for him was the Boy Scout Jamboree. And he said he had been a Boy Scout, and then I said, oh, my husband was a Boy Scout. In fact, my husband is one of 6 boys. His mom and dad had 4 boys. His mom wanted to have a girl, got pregnant again, and had identical twin boys. And they lived in a trailer court with triple bunk beds. And they were very involved in scouting to the point where 5 of the 6 boys became Eagle Scouts. I don't like to say which one didn't make it because I don't want to embarrass my husband. So I told this guy that story, and then he said, well, you know, that was a real important part of my life, and when I saw Donald Trump give that political speech to a bunch of young people at that jamboree, he said, that was it for me. And this tear comes down his face. He said, for me, and he went like this, what I did, it wasn't patriotic for me. Then I was in New Hampshire, long line of people in Conway, New Hampshire, in northern New Hampshire, bunch of people that have these happy stickers on. I'm a climate change voter. I'm a Supreme Court voter. I'm a reproductive rights voter. And I see this guy in a brown jacket. I said, sir, you don't have on a sticker. And he leans over and he said, yeah, that's because I was a Trump voter. And we don't have a sticker, and I don't want my friends and neighbors to know. They don't know, so don't say anything. And he says, but I'm not doing it again. So when you look at what happened in 2018 across this country, because I think history matters, look at what happened. These aren't just my stories. We elected a Democratic woman as the governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly. She beat Chris Klobuchar. We elected a Democratic governor in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. We elected, just in the last few months, re-elected a Democratic governor in Louisiana, elected a Democratic governor in Kentucky. So Mitch McConnell now has a Democratic governor. So if we can win with our fired up Democratic base and bringing with us independents and moderate Republicans, if we can win in Louisiana and Kentucky, those red states, yes, we can win in the general election statewide in the state of Iowa. Of course we can do that. Of course we can do that. But I have some profound advice for all of you, because caucus night is what? 2 nights away. I've lost a little track of time with my last 2 weeks. My profound advice is this: we better not screw this up, okay? Because people want to come with us. And so what does that mean? Well, that means, first of all, putting a candidate at the top of the ticket who has the receipts. It is not just talking points, but has brought people with her time and time again, as Peggy Flanagan explained to you, as my great campaign chair, Andy, right back there, would tell you. We have done this time and time again in the reddest of districts. Michelle Bachmann's district, I have won 3 times, never lost it, because I bring the rural district in southern Minnesota that borders Iowa. I have won every single time, even though it is currently held by a Republican rep. I have won the one that borders North and South Dakota. I have done it with ease, but I have done it for not just me. I have brought people with me. That is how we flip the state house in Minnesota, and that is how we will flip it in the state of Iowa. So as we look into that general election, and I know we're in a primary right now. Look, I know that we're in a primary right now. But one of your jobs is to look at how we're going to win in the general. That is your job. And I know we're in the caucuses, and I know we're going through to New Hampshire and all that. But the job of the voters is to figure out, okay, who should we give tickets to? Who should we have go on to the next level so we can figure out who should lead that ticket? That's what this is about. And so when we do that, we have to think of those general election voters. So this is what I think. When I talk to them, a bunch of them know that Donald Trump is a bully. They know he's a racist. They know he goes after immigrants all the time. They think that's bad, but they also know something else. They know that he made a bunch of promises to them. He promised them cheaper prescription drugs. Did not happen. They've gone skyrocketing. He promised them infrastructure. Look at the flooding that we've seen all over Iowa because of broken levees and the like. He promised them that he'd make it easier for people in rural areas, but we've seen a 25% increase in farm bankruptcies while he has been president. Why? His trade war. Look at what he did when it came to the oil waivers to the big oil companies, screwing up the renewable fuel standard, something I have led on since I've gotten to the United States Senate, and as president, I will fix it. So he has done all those things. But when they think of him, they think of the fact that when things go wrong in their lives and they can't afford the insulin and have to keep the injectors for their kids, that happens. When they think about the fact that they can't afford a mortgage and they have to take out another loan, they look at him. He's got the best job in the world. He lives in this nice big house. His dad gave him $413 million over the course of his life. And when things go wrong for him, what does he do? He walks by that helicopter and he whines. That's what he does. We do not need a whiner in the White House when people are working hard every single day. He whines. He blames other people. He blames Barack Obama. He blames the head of the Federal Reserve. He blames the city of Baltimore. He blames the entire country of Denmark. Who does that? That is what he does. So I want you to picture me on that debate stage with that guy. And you know if you have watched the debates that no one scares me, all right? You know that, and you know that I am nimble on my feet. And you know what I am going to say? When he stands there and claims about what he's done, I'm going to look at him and say, you know, the Midwest is not flyover country to me. Those farmers and workers in the middle of country are not poker chips in one of my bankrupt casinos because I don't own any casinos. They are my friends and my neighbors. And get this, listen to my bio compared to his. My grandpa, he worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines his whole life. My grandma would pack this lunch bucket for him, and he would go down in that cage every day because he had 9 brothers and sisters. His parents died very early. He was the oldest son, and he had to quit school to support that family. And he did it. His youngest sister had to go to an orphanage in Duluth, and he went and he got her. Then, nice, it was getting kind of hot in here anyway. And I will say this, those mines back then were very dangerous. The whistle would go off and everyone would run. They didn't know who died. Was it going to be their husband, their son? And then finally what happens is the unions come in and they made those mines safer. They made those mines safer. The other thing that happened was he decided he was going to give my dad a different life, and he put this coffee can in the basement. And he and my grandma saved money in the coffee can to send my dad and his brother to a community college. That's what he did. And that was our family trust. And you cannot fit $413 million in a coffee can in the basement. My mom, she grew up in Milwaukee, and she wanted to be a teacher, so she moved to Minnesota, and she taught 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. So I stand before you today as the granddaughter of an iron ore miner, as a daughter of a teacher and a newspaper man, as the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for President of the United States. That is because We live in a country of shared dreams, that no matter where you come from or who you know or how much money you have or the color of your skin or where you worship or who you love, that you can make it in the United States of America. And that is what we don't want to lose in all of this as he tries to fracture our country. Because I figure when you are given opportunity from someone, whether it's a parent or a grandparent, a teacher, someone you work with, you do not go into the world with a sense of entitlement. You go into the world with a sense of obligation, an obligation to lift people up instead of shutting them down, an obligation to bring people with you instead of hoarding it to yourself. I was reading the other day, as again, when we sit in that Senate chamber, you think a lot about founding fathers, you think about past presidents, and when I got home, I was reading a book on leadership by Doris Kearns Goodwin, and it was about how all these different presidents, and that one of the things they had most in common was resilience. It was resilience, not how they did when times were good in their lives, but how they did when times were bad. And as I thought about it, I remembered one of the presidents she talked about was FDR. And there's a story about FDR that when he died, they put his body on a train and it went across the country, and people stood in droves by the railroad tracks. And this reporter was standing next to a guy, regular guy, with his hat in his hand, and he was sobbing. And the reporter looks at the guy and he says to him, "Sir, did you know President Roosevelt?" And the guy says, "No, I didn't know President Roosevelt, but he knew me. He knew me." That is leadership. That is empathy. That is something that we don't have in the White House right now. Someone that cares and understands about the lives of everyday Americans. And that is the case that we're going to make. Along with that, an optimistic economic agenda for this country. Somehow in 2016, you know, that got lost. No one had run against someone like Donald Trump before. He was going down every rabbit hole. We were all going down every rabbit hole. But this time, we got his number. And we are going to focus on an optimistic economic agenda for this country. That means meeting the challenges of everyday people. That means meeting the challenge of health care. And you all know that's been debated a lot on the debate stage. My position is actually pretty practical. I don't like to blow things up that people like. I like to make them better. And so right now, the Affordable Care Act is nearly 10 points more popular than the President of the United States. So I don't think we should be blowing it up. I think we should be building on it with a nonprofit public option by taking on the pharmaceutical companies, and I lead nearly every bill when it comes to taking on the pharmaceutical companies, from unleashing the power of our seniors to negotiate better prices, getting rid of that ban that pharma put in law that doesn't allow that to happen, bringing in less expensive drugs from other countries. In Minnesota, we can see Canada from our porch, and I see those less expensive drugs. That is a bill that I have done for years. It's been bipartisan. Latest attempt we did was at midnight. Klobuchar, Sanders, Bernie, and I put it on the floor. We got 14 Republican votes at midnight. They might have been tired. I don't know. But we did that. I can get that done. I can actually get that done myself, which is one of the reasons I put out that 100-day plan with 137 things that a president can do herself without Congress that are legal. So we can do that. We can take on mental illness and addiction, something that no president has come into saying is one of their top priorities. I do because, like for so many of you, it is personal for me. My dad struggled with alcoholism my whole life growing up. By the time John and I got married, he had 3 DWIs. The judge said to him, "You pick, treatment or jail." He picked treatment. And in his words, he was pursued by grace. It changed his life. And now at age 91, he is sober. His AA group still visits him. He's in assisted living. And in his words, it's hard to get a drink around here anyway. I think everyone has that right to be pursued by grace. And that means whether it's opioid addiction or meth, crack cocaine, whether it's mental health. And no one knows it better than this state, where you only have 64 public mental health beds in the entire state of Iowa. So when you hear these stories of friends of yours or people you know not being able to get the help they need, that's it. That's the problem. And that's why I have a plan that also includes mental health. Last thing I'll mention, long-term care. Again, my dad's story, he got long-term care insurance. I don't know why, but he did. That helps him right now. He's in a home with 15 people. He's really happy, but I know exactly when that ends. In fact, I was out emailing people about it during the impeachment hearing, just like people. So that ends in a year and a half. Then after that, we go into his savings, not as big as we thought, because as John knows, he got married 3 times, but that's a whole other story. Then after that, he goes on Medicaid. And then he has to move, because the place he is doesn't take, he can move to the White House. Yes, that'll, you know. I guess we'll get a bedroom. There we go. That is thinking big. That solves everything. Okay? I'll leave it there. I won't talk about the Catholic elder care and various other things. But the truth is, I think everyone knows stories like this. And it's not just our seniors that we want to have, of course, one, strong Social Security and make sure it stays solvent, 2, Medicaid, but 3, some really innovative things we should be doing with long-term care to make it easier to get long-term care insurance, to make it easier for people to be at home, to make this a major priority, because it's not just seniors. Every family in here, people are struggling to take care of their own kids, and then at the same time, they're aging parents. It's about caregivers and the like. Other challenges, matching our education system with the economy that we have. I was teasing some of my opponents up there. You guys, I know you got this bumper sticker solution, but you're actually not thinking big enough. When you think big, you think, what are the jobs in our economy that we need to fill? We are going to have over 1 million openings for home health care workers. And right now, unless we do something about child care, especially in rural areas, and about long-term care, and about all these things we need to do, we're not going to get people to fill those jobs and make sure that we respect the dignity of work so people will go into those jobs. We're going to have nationally over 100,000 openings for nursing assistants that take 1- and 2-year degrees that we don't know how we're going to fill right now. We are going to have over 70,000 openings for electricians. We are not going to have a shortage of MBAs or sports marketing degrees. Sorry, anyone that has one. We are going to have a shortage of plumbers. And so the key is to look at how we match our education system with our economy. That leads you clear into one direction. K through 12 and preschool investment, very important. That leads you to figuring out how people can make a living by taking some of these jobs that are not as high paying. That leads you to doubling the Pell Grants and making sure that the money is going where it should. And I'm telling you, that leads you to one really easy solution in the first 100 days. Actually, the first 100 seconds. Fire Betsy DeVos. So, as we look at our workforce needs, particularly in this state, look at immigration reform. That was a bipartisan bill until it died in John Boehner's freezer next to the frozen peas. We can get this done. It is good we need workers in our fields and in our factories, starting small businesses. 70 of our Fortune 500 companies are headed up by people from other countries. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries. Immigrants don't diminish America. They are America. It is an economic imperative. It is an economic issue. As much as Donald Trump likes to use immigrants as a wedge, it is an economic issue. Last thing, rural issues. I am the one person up on that debate stage that wanted to be on the Ag Committee, that served on the Ag Committee, that's negotiated with my colleagues 3 farm bills, that served with the great chairman, Tom Harkin, of the Ag Committee. I love rural issues because I like things that are more complicated. It's not one size fits all, right? It isn't. Rural education, rural hospitals, it's a different thing. And I also lead to that is what's going on with our infrastructure. What is going on with our country when we're seeing this flooding? It leads you to one place, that's climate change, which is literally, thank you, the existential crisis of our time. And we can do this. On day 1, we will get back into the International Climate Change Agreement. On day 2, we will bring back the clean power standards. On day 3, we will bring back the gas mileage standards. You can do all that without Congress. Then we will introduce sweeping legislation. I will have the ability to get this done. Why? 1, I know what I'm doing. I passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat, more than anyone else in Congress running for president. Number two, I know where the bodies are. I know what people are thinking. I know how to find common ground. And then the last thing I'll say is I know how to talk about things in a way that makes sense to people. Because this is an issue, huge issue in Florida as we see the rising sea levels, huge issue in California with those horrible fires, but it's also an issue in the middle of the country. And we have got to make that case for the floods, for the weird weather events, for the farmers not being able to plant, for the increasing amounts of money you have to pay for homeowners insurance. We have got to make that economic case and then tie it to a policy that makes sure that people will get their money back when we put a price on carbon, and there's a lot of different ways that we can do it. That's how we get the votes to get this done. Because with my friend Peggy, one of my favorite Ojibwe sayings is this: great leaders make decisions, yes, for this generation, but also for 7 generations from now. And that is what we have to do as we look at this problem. So my last thing I'm going to say is this. The one thing that we all agree on, in addition to the heart thing I raised before, is this: we have to win. And we have to win. Eking by a victory at 4 in the morning, that will be sweet, I know that. But we want to win big. We want to bring with us, we want to win the Senate seats in places like Colorado and Arizona and Iowa. And to do that is how we send Mitch McConnell packing. That is how we pass those 400 bills that are sitting on his desk, like gun safety legislation, which the majority of hunters and Trump voters actually support. Universal background checks. That's how we're going to pass all these things we've talked about today and get this done. Because if we eke by that victory at 4 in the morning, as sweet as it will be, that state will not be Iowa. I can tell you that much. So I want to come in there with a whole bunch of people behind me so we can actually shake things up and do things for democracy. And the way you do that is putting someone at the top of the ticket that gets it, that can bring people with her. So that's why I'm asking you to help me today. We have been on a long journey together. It started actually on election night in 2016. You all remember that night. I remember that night because I was out campaigning in Minnesota, giving speeches, and I got home really late, and I got a text from Abigail, who was in college, and she was at Hillary's party in New York at the place. And I had forgotten she was there. And she wrote me this text, and it said this simply: "Mom, what should we do now?" And I wrote this mom guilt thing back, like in 1 minute, because I had forgotten she was there. And it said, the subways are still running. You have to get back. This isn't going well tonight. And remember, you have class tomorrow. That's what I wrote. And then she wrote back, "Mom, I mean our country." So that is the question that we ask ourselves every day since then. What should we do now? And if we answer it with apathy, and we wake up in the morning and we see one of those mean tweets and we put the blanket over our head, then we don't win. We have to answer it with action. Look at the march we are on. From the day after that inauguration, millions of people marched peacefully across this country, including right here in Iowa. Look at what happened the day after that. 6,000 women signed up to run for office, and that number doubled and tripled and quadrupled. On day 9 after that, when that mean-spirited refugee order came out, what did people do? They spontaneously showed up at airports all across the country. Who does that on a Saturday night? Well, you probably would, because you're here. They did that. You go fast forward to day something like 100, the March for Science, my favorite march with my favorite sign. What do we want? Science. When do we want it? After peer review. You get through to the summer when the Fighting 48 Democrats stood up against that mean-spirited effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and we united across the country, and because we did that, we were joined by 3 Republicans when my friend John McCain walked in there and with his tortured, injured arm did that no. We did that together. I still remember being in a small town parade, and a mom had a stroller, and there was a little boy in the stroller, and at that moment she says, "This is my son. He's got Down syndrome. I'll do anything to fight for his health care." And then she says, "This is what a pre-existing condition looks like." She was united with us because we had brought her with us. That's what elections are about. Then you go into the fall, the first glimmers of hope, when legislative races were won all over the country. My personal favorite, this guy in New Jersey, who the day of the Women's March had said, "I hope they'll be home in time to make dinner." He lost that election to an African American woman. That happened. That happened. And then, in the state of Alabama, in a victory for dignity, a victory against racism, Doug Jones wins a Senate seat in the state of Alabama. That is the march that we are on. And then after the tragedy in Parkland, or after the heartbreak of trying to get gun safety legislation passed, I've been part of this effort, and it's been a heartbreak. Those kids stood up in Florida, and they become icons. Of course, hand in hand with the moms who've demanded action. And those kids march across the country, and other kids start talking to their parents, and pretty soon we see change in who we elected to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives becomes the people's house again. That is ideas being turned into action. That is the march that we are on. So I never want you to feel as soul-crunching as some of the things this guy does, and as hard as this last week was. Never lose faith that we are on this march together. And so my last thing is to ask you, it's getting warm. My last thing is to ask you to join our team. We have this incredible staff. Literally this last week, when I was in Washington and we suddenly got out of the blue at like 3 in the afternoon, I called them and they said, "Get on a plane, we'll do an event in Council Bluffs." With 4 hours notice, they did that, and we had hundreds of people. They have been at my side from the very beginning, never losing hope. And I ask you to do the same. We picked the color green because of one of my political mentors, Paul Wellstone. He was Tom Harkin's best friend in the U.S. Senate. In the last year of his life, when he tragically died in that plane crash, he couldn't run like he used to. He was going to win his race. He took a brave vote against the war in Iraq. He was going to win his race. But what he couldn't do is run like he used to. He used to run in the parades back and forth, with all this joy. But he had told the state he had MS. So instead he could only stand on the back of the bus, his green bus, like we have a green bus, and wave. But here's the coolest part. He had energized so many people by his work, by his actions, that there were people in these green shirts running around that bus with so much motion that you didn't even notice he wasn't running himself. So what I am asking you to do for me, because I was not here last week, I couldn't go to every town like I wanted to and do all 99 counties for a second time. I am asking you to run for me. I am asking you to caucus for me and sign those commit to caucus cards. I am asking you to volunteer in those precious 2 days we have left and make calls, maybe not during the Super Bowl, but make calls to people. I am asking you to be leaders in your caucus. If you sign up to be a precinct chair, you get a free green shirt. Woo-hoo! Precinct captain. That's what I'm asking you to do, because I believe in my heart. It's not about who has the biggest bank account. It's not about who has the loudest voice. Time and time again, America has proven this. It is about who is that person that when they are done with their work, a guy stands by the side of a railroad track and says, "Yeah, he didn't know me or she didn't know me, but I knew her. I know her, and as a president, she knows me." That is what we want. So I'm asking you to join us. Sign up, get your green shirt, and let's go out and let's make history. Let's win this! Thank you, everybody!